So yeah, hello everyone. So there was a very fun typo on how our talk name was presented. So it's actually like design tokens, building blocks for developer collaboration, because it's about collaboration. And I'm Débora. I am an application engineer at the Lego Group. I am here with Jeremy, which I will refer to as Jazz, who is a lead digital product designer, also at the Lego Group. We work on the same team. And yeah, I will start this talk with a story. So it's a story that probably has happened to, with everyone or almost everyone. I believe so. So it starts when a designer comes to a group of developers and say, there's a new style property that's come, like, let's say a primary button color. And the natural instinct for us developers is to go and say, okay, I'll put it on a global variable and use it around. But also there's a natural instinct for us to hurry up some task and hard code it somewhere. That may happen. So yeah, the problem really starts afterwards. So on the next slide, because the designer comes and says, for any reason, maybe because the branding changed or because of anything else, the color has changed, or let's say the font family has changed, and now it's different. And then we can say, okay, I'll just change the global variable, consider the task done. But the problem is, what about the hard-coded values? What about everything else that's hidden underneath? What if the developer that has done that has changed teams or left the company? So we have actual problem is that everyone is unhappy because the designer is going to see an inconsistent design. There may be problems with the branding. And also for the developer, they're going to need to manually go and replace everything. And it's a repetitive task and not really engaging. So this is why we're here to talk about the solution that we're trying to bring and apply to the Lego Group and Lego.com nowadays, which is design tokens. And we're going to talk about why is a design system important at the Lego Group, how we have set up our system, and also what are our main challenges and learnings over the last few months, like over the last year that we've been implementing this new design. So yeah, just a quick introduction. I'll go first. So yeah, my name is Débora. I am a full stack engineer, application engineer at the Lego Group. I've been working there for over a year now. And I am Brazilian. I've been living in London for the past 3 years. I have a bit over 3 years experience as a developer. And yeah, that's my username there.
Yep, and I'm Jeremy, or Jez. So I've been in Lego Group almost 5 years now. I've been in the design industry for about 19 years. And if you're interested in Lego or toy photography, then my Instagram handle is down there. So a little introduction about what Lego Group is. Obviously, everyone knows who Lego are. It's a Danish company founded in 1932. One of the world's leading manufacturers of play materials. In the area that we are in, digital technology, is over 1,000 employees. And we have offices in London, Billund and Copenhagen. And if you are interested, we are hiring for many different positions, so we can point you in the right direction for that.
So if we go back to the problem that the story was talking about, like if we want to state a problem in one sentence, would be how can we improve the design and developer collaboration in teams and reduce the repetitive work while still allowing for frequent design iterations?
So what are our goals and what's our audience type? So our ambition for the system is, for example, if the brands are starting at the bottom here, say the brand want to change their typeface, they want to change the Lego logo from red to pink. The whole point of that is that if we have a powerful design system, those changes can creep into that system and it can then spurt out into different areas. So we have web, native, kiosk experiences, and that then helps all of our different types, so consumer, shopper, partner, and colleagues. That's the ambition of what our design system is. So the fundamental layers there, so the red layer there, that's where the brand sits. That comes into our global token layer, which then filters into our core systems, the alias layers, and of course, that's all built off components. So our user group, so Lego, being such a big company, we have 4 different areas that we focus on. We have an education side, we have a consumer, so it's our kids' experiences. The shopper and grown-ups area, that's the area that Deb and I are in. And then partner colleagues, so all our kind of B2B experiences. So we have 4 different user groups, 4 different experiences that the design system tokens have to kind of apply in. So we have this kind of global design systems layer with the supporting CDM. And what are the goals for the design system? Why are we doing this? What's the most important thing here? So we have 6 points that are really important for us. So it's to remove that duplication. We have so many teams doing the same work. We have many little kind of component libraries that sit across the system. So removing that is really important. making it more efficient. So the speeding up of design and development is really key. Again, accessibility, being able to be consistent and accessible with our kind of performance. Quality assurance. So again, yes, the design system is fantastic, but we need to get it into the audience, into the users. We need to iterate, learn on those changes and bring them back into the system. Of course, cohesiveness is really important. So we have a very large Lego ecosystem. So how do we make sure it's consistent across all the experiences and to be scalable? So making sure that when we have new designers onboarding or developers onboarding, that they can get into the experience really quickly. And also, if like Deb said, if a developer moves from product to product, how do we make sure that they're kind of linked into that?
Oh. So yeah, moving next to how have we set up our system. There's like this would be like a simplified view of how the end-to-end pipeline of a design token would go from the UX tool until the web page. So this would be trying to abstract it away from the specific choices. Of course, I'm using the Figma logo here, but it could be like most of the major UX tools nowadays have some sort of support for design tokens. So it's up for the designers to create, to name and give values to the design tokens that are going to be consumed. And then those can be transformed into JSON objects by this plugin. And then they can be synced into a storage, which in most cases is going to be a code repository, because then the developers need to apply some logic and some extra transformations on it. So I gave some examples as like CSS or JavaScript or TypeScript variables, but it could be anything that can be then further consumed and rendered into a web page. And if we go to the next slide, this is just like I use the logos as a way to just go a bit more into details on what are our particular choices for Lego.com at the moment. We are using Figma as the UX tool of choice. And then the most mature plugin at the moment would be Token Studio. For Figma, they have like of course, a free version if you want to just play around, but the pro version is quite complete and has many useful features. So the designers have been using this pro version. Then we have a library called Design Systems for our tokens. We use this open source tool here by Amazon called Style Dictionary, which transforms like the JSON files into anything that we want. They have like a wide range of like possible outputs. We use it to transform our tokens mostly into CSS variables and TypeScript types. Then we reconsume those tokens into our component library, which we call Scroll. Just gonna show a bit more about like how Scroll looks like, but it's our component library, which is built out of TypeScript, React, and CSS modules. Then that component library is exported as a version of the library, and we consume it in our front-end monorepo. It's a Next.js app, and finally that's rendered as Lego.com that you can visit nowadays. Yeah, and then over to Jazz for...
Yeah, so just talk a little bit about a kind of design system structure. So I mentioned about the 4 user groups. We have 4 kind of lead designers that sit across this. And this is kind of how our structure is set up. So we have, again, from the Figma side, we're obviously communicating through to GitHub wherever we can. So the core area, that's where our kind of core global tokens live. And that also includes our kind of color library and our typography kind of, we have a flexible max and min typography scale that sits in the core layer. Then we have our CDN, so it's our supporting icon, logo, and brick library. And then I mentioned here before about this is where Scroll is. So these are our user groups. So as a kind of design guild, we look at the components. So you might have a button, you might have a text input. We look at all the fundamental requirements that all the different user groups need. We work together on that, and then once we're happy with it, that then goes into the different styles and components area, depending on which user group they're in. And of course, the styles and components also have patterns, which is obviously pre-composited components. And eventually that then goes into modules, which is kind of content experiences that we have on the site. But each of those sections kind of a read and write kind of level with GitHub. So again, I mentioned global tokens. So we have quite a lot of different areas. I mentioned about the font scale. So we have a max and min font scale. So as the browser kind of scales down, the font kind of comes with it. We have global sizes, global spacing. And then I mentioned a bit before, we have a kind of global color palette where today kind of producers can put any kind of hex value into the system, where we're trying to lock that down now to make sure we have one source of truth around our global color palette. Then when it comes out of the global layer, this is something actually kind of in work in progress on the right-hand side. We're trying to figure out kind of tokens markup, the best way to kind of keep consistency across how we go here. So the first bit you're seeing there is the alias layer. So we have like a base and a modifier. So an example of this could be like a sizing, like a size min. Excel is an example of that. So you're kind of taking a category, a property, and a scale. Another example there could be then for the text header. So it's a concept, a property, and then the scale is bold. So we have all these different alias values for all the different properties that we have. And then, of course, this is something completely brand new that we're just kind of coming into now, is then how does that turn into the components layer? So the big bit that comes in there is what is the object? So, for example, an example of that could be an input, a checkbox input, which has the background, the input container. What size is that? It's large. And then another one here, the action, the button component has a primary state, a variant of emphasis, it has a label, it has a color, and it has a hover state. And for example, something like a checkbox, it could have 40 different component tokens. So it's really quite detailed and really quite heavy. But the reason why we're doing this is that, yes, the alias token is very important. You can get all the cool colors in here, so the cool colors that we're using here. But if we ever any reason Lego want to change our kind of emphasis, our CTA to pink, then we can automatically do that. But if it's a certain part of the component we don't want to do that, then we can tackle that with the component layer. So it does look a bit crazy, a bit mad, but it does have some logic behind it. And then just in case anyone doesn't know the difference between the three areas, we have obviously the global layer, the alias layer, and the component layer. So for us, and one thing we try and make sure that anyone who consumes is do not consume the global tokens. Don't use that directly. That's the kind of the big box of Lego bricks. That's everything that we have to offer. Examples of that are kind of the core blue 1300 or the core orange 700. We have like kind of color scales that we brought in. What we do want people to use is the alias layer. This is the layer where we kind of start to put kind of statements on this. So action primary pressed, action emphasis default. This is the cushion layer. This is very important for teams to use. And eventually, once we start getting component tokens in, because that is our next thing we're looking to do, then you have really kind of decisive areas where you've got checkbooks, input color selected. So you can see that's the background blue. And then the button emphasis color enabled is the background of the button. So, and again, our eventual goal is to move the cushion layer down one. So then only the component token layer should be utilized in that space. And then we mentioned about scroll. So this is something that we're trying to get from documentation points of view. So a designer, there's a lot of different states to a button. So we have a variant, we have a scale, we have a size, states and usages. So we're trying to make it quite simple for documentation point purposes. So the designer can understand the ins and outs of a component. When it comes to sending it over to developers, we have the component annotation tool. So again, that's coming from the Figma plugin. And then of course, the bottom down there is the API state. So what as we go and build through every component to make sure we're keeping the same kind of rules that we're putting in. So what's the variant naming? What's the scale, size, usage, all that kind of stuff, because you can easily build a component and not have consistency as you go across the board. Oh, sorry, one more slide. And I mentioned about scroll. So scroll is the kind of the naming convention we have for the shopper side. So again, we have a clear destination for design, so the Figma side, and then we have a clear destination in Storybook. So anything that's being worked on, we have the one source of truth coming across these two different bases.
Nice. So we wanted to show how we've been applying this system at Lego.com. This is one example that I really like to show because it's the first one, it's the first module, front-end module that we managed to put in production. Soon, like 3 months after we started building this new component library and this new design system, which is this banner, Advanced Product Hero banner. It has like this big name, but what is really cool about it, you can see in the boxes what types of properties we had through tokens, but like there's no hard-coded values. There's no like old way of consuming style properties in this one. It's all coming from CSS variables. There are design tokens. So all coming through Figma. And the buttons, they are scroll buttons, which they are buttons that were also built from design tokens. So it's all in there. And if we go next, yeah, this is the project redesign. It's not fully implemented in production yet, but it's the project that we have for the redesign of the product listing page. And this is our goal for this year, like stabilizing the design and bringing this brand consistency to all of the pages at Lego.com. So we've been doing slightly, the buttons are already implemented, and we're going to add more and more components to scroll and use them. But yeah, we can see like, again, the boxes are similar because we're just applying those basic styles like over and over through design tokens.
So challenges and learnings, what have we learned? And again, it's a very short space of time that we've done this, and there's a lot still to do. So the first one, naming is hard. Like, it's very easy to make a breaking change, and the amount of times Deb and other developers have had a go at me about it. So for example, a breaking change for us is at the top there, I'd have blue 900. If I decide to call that bright blue 900, don't do that. It's a breaking change. But the value can change. So you might have blue 900, which is the hex value you see there. That's fine. You can change the value underneath it, but as long as the name convention stays the same, it's important. So keep taking names coherent throughout the time. It really helps when it comes to scaling the system, because if you are going to break it, it's going to be very, very challenging. So what the learning is from this, I mentioned before about aliasing. Aliasing is really important at this stage. Eventually it will be the component layer. And avoid consuming global tokens in the code. Like, if you have a very small system, fine, that works. But we have got quite a large system, and it's going to get bigger. Consider scalability from the start. So if you are going to make breaking changes, do it earlier on. Don't do it later down the line, because you have a lot of rework to do, and a lot of developers will hate you. Up to you.
Yeah. The second one is more about the code side of it. It's like choosing how to consume and version the design system from the start. And this can be a bit tricky, because at the same time, we want to ensure consistency throughout like different teams and different squads. And how can we make sure that everyone is using the same value for a given token? At the same time, how can we kind of create this alias of action between the rest of the front-end development and the design system? In our case, we decided to go with a version package. So Scroll, our component library, is a separate package from our monorepo. However, at the same time, we need to ensure that everyone's consuming the same package. So we don't give our squads the freedom to go and use the minor version that they want. Everyone needs to be on the same page. This causes a bit of like back and forth. We need to take accountability for some breaking changes, major versions, which is not the way we ideally want to do, but so it works for us at the moment, controlling the version for everyone. And then following the semantic versioning and being very strict about what is a minor version, what is a major, what is a patch. Like, it can be painful. For us, it was like a learning experience, how to do it internally, and then still be accountable for it, but it's worth it so far. The third one is like about communication. So it's both on the like developer design and like collaboration. It's really important to keep talking and collaborating and don't work in silos. It's very easy, even with this new approach of having a pipeline that goes from designer to development quite automatically. It's easy to slip into misalignment. So for the designers to go ahead in Figma, or for the developers to just rush with new implementations. But it's very important to be aligned and don't let one go too far ahead from the other. And also the second part is communicating with users and just explaining then why we're going for this different approach, why are things changing, and just leaving some open communication channels for them to come back to us and ask questions. So yeah, for major learnings, just like pairing sessions. So yeah, me and Jazz, we have spent like hours pairing together, and this has helped like both sides. I think we now have a very good understanding of how his approach to design tokens work, and he understands how I have to handle the changes. And this is something that actually helps a lot in the process.
Cool. And then scaling consumption. So development teams require components. So for example, as we scale this out, people will need components. Doesn't exist yet. How do we get that in there? So that's very important challenge. And obviously the system only works if the squads are going to adopt it. We have an existing component library which people will just keep jumping to. How do we get them off that and move to the new one? That's quite an important one. So for us, it's bringing user requirements in at the component layer. At the component stage. So I will go and link up to all the different designers, find out all the requirements that they have, and then obviously then bring those into the build. And then obviously unlocking the squad's ability to build components following a contribution guide. So it's something that we've built out now. So we're not literally just holding to one squad that works on this. Other squads can contribute and they can build. And then the most important thing, I think, which we're still to do, is to bring the user feedback. So once the component is out there and the users are actually kind of interacting with that, have we made an improvement? Have we made some things better for the user? So getting that feedback is really important to make sure the components are better. So for me, it's improving the feedback loop is really, really important. So user testing that, iterating it, learning, bring it back into the system. And again, that design pairing, we mentioned obviously the design and development pairing is important, but also design pairing across the squads is also a valuable thing. So recap and conclusion. So just a quick few points here. So obviously design tokens, key value pairs of design properties. Obviously we're currently using Figma as a UX tool. And obviously we sync that into the code repository. And the aim of this is to ensure consistency and save time for both designers and developers when updating a design system.
Yeah, something that you, like both designers and developers, gain from using this new approach is everyone is really clear on what are the roles and responsibilities, and they have more clarity around like what they should do, like what is their place. At the same time, like it still allows for a lot of collaboration. And the main challenges, as we show, were around communication, naming, versioning, scaling, and feedback. The main tip around this, other than the things that we shared, is just to try to agree and acknowledge those challenges as early as possible before the system scales too much. And this is a QR code with a couple of resources, especially around like some of the libraries we've been using, style dictionary, some articles and videos, and yeah, also the link to Lego Careers if you are interested. Yeah.
I won't go into the next page because I think people are taking pictures.
Yeah.
The next page is thank you. So.
Yeah, and it's thank you. Thank you a lot for listening. Yeah.